Years ago this week, Mort Walker, one of the three big Morts, was born. Mort Walker sold his first cartoon when he was 11 years old. He worked right up until his passing in 2018 at the age of 94. He was involved in the creation of 9 syndicated comic strips, including Beetle Bailey and Hi and Lois. He was the founder of the Museum of Cartoon Art, authored many influential books, including Backstage at the Strips and the Lexicon of Comicana. Using historic photographs, special artwork, and amusing anecdotes, Brian Walker will emphasize Mort's dedication to the National Cartoonists Society, in which he served as president in 1959. Brian's seminar promises to be an entertaining trip down memory lane for both fans and friends of the legendary cartoonist. I should add that in conjunction with this event this weekend, the Society of Illustrators in New York will be featuring the Mort Walker, a Centennial celebration exhibit from August 2nd to September 30th. It will feature many treasures from the Walker family collection, including hand-colored Sunday pages and rare strips. The Manhattan NCS hosted a special opening with assistance and with thanks to King. Thank you, CJ and the team. The opening at the Society, it was very touching seeing the Walker boys all together celebrating 100 years of their dad. Brian Walker has a diverse background in professional cartooning. He's a founder and former director of the Museum of Cartoon Art, where he worked from 1974 to 1992. Since 1984, he has been part of the creative team that produces the comic strips Beetle Bailey and Hi and Lois. He has written, edited, or contributed to 45 books on cartoon art, including The Definitive History, The Comics, The Complete Collection, published by Abrams Comic Arts, and has served as a curator for 75 cartoon exhibitions. Brian is also the founder and current chairman of the Connecticut chapter of the National Cartoonists Society. He is our Silver T-Square honoree for this year. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Brian Walker.
We're here today to celebrate the legacy of my father, Mort Walker, who would have been 100 years old on Sunday of this very week. Mort always knew he wanted to be a cartoonist. Here he is in 1938, looking like a pro at age 14, sitting at his drawing board in his room in Kansas City, inking a strip with a flexible nib pen. His studio would get bigger over the years, but his work didn't change that much. After high school, he was attending Kansas City Junior College when he got a job designing greeting cards for Hall Brothers, which later was known as Hallmark. Some of them were for GIs to write home to their families. The drawing on the right was a promotional piece he did for a new line of Disney cards. He was drafted into the Army in 1942 and sent to Italy, where he wandered around with his camera taking pictures of scenes that would later turn up in his comic strip. That's Mount Vesuvius in the background. He was in Naples. After the war, he enrolled at the University of Missouri and was the editor of the campus humor magazine, which was called the Show Me. The staff, including my mother, that's my mother there. On the right in the photo, they would meet at the local hangout, which was called the Shack. One of their more controversial efforts was the sex issue, which got them in trouble with the administration. After graduation, Mort went to New York City and worked as a freelance gag cartoonist, selling to the major national magazines. Some of his cartoons had a college theme and starred a character with a hat over his eyes named Spider, whose name was later changed to Beetle. At the suggestion of John Bailey, who was the editor of the Saturday Evening Post, Mort created a college-themed strip and sold it to King Features. This is the first sales brochure from 1950. It was the last comic strip to be personally approved by William Randolph Hearst. The cast included Beetle, his fraternity brothers, his girlfriend Buzz, and a professor named Heckle. After 6 months, the strip was only sold to 25 newspapers, and Mort was afraid of being canceled. The Korean War was starting to heat up, so he decided to have Beetle enlist in the army. This is the actual fateful scene in which Beetle signs up and seals his fate. King announced the change in the 1951 sales brochure on the right. Beetle Bailey took off, and a Sunday page was added in 1952. Sergeant Snorkel, General Half-Track, Zero, and Killer were regular characters in the strip at this time. After the Korean War was over, Mort was concerned that readers would no longer relate to the military theme and consider having Beetle return to civilian life. When Beetle visited his sister Lois and their family to discuss his future, readers wrote in to protest. Beetle returned to Camp Swampy and has been there ever since. That's his little brother Chigger in the corner, who had the right idea. Since Mort had a growing family, King Features editor Sylvan Bike suggested to him that he start a second strip starring Beetle's sister Lois. They decided to give it a shot, and after a talent search, both ended up with Dick Brown at the top of their list. They hired the talented advertising artist, and High and Lois debuted on October 18, 1954. Mort and Dick became lifelong partners and friends. They actually didn't work together in the same studio. That's like a setup shot for the publicity. The National Cartoonists Society was founded in 1946, and Mort became a member in 1950. At the April dinner in 1954, Rube Goldberg presented the Billy DeBeck Award for Outstanding Cartoonist of 1953 to Mort, seen here with my mother, Jean. The old guard used to call my dad the Kid. The National Cartoonists Society newsletter did a feature story on Mort after he won the award. That's our new home in Greenwich, Connecticut, in the upper right there. That's my baby sister, Polly, and that's Greg and I helping our dad with the yard work. Mort was the secretary of the NCS when this article ran. This home movie from the 1950s shows Mort in his third-floor studio pinpointing new clients on his map, inking a Sunday page at his drawing board, and writing gags in his easy chair. Mort served as the president of the NCS from 1959 to 1960. In the photo on the left, he is presenting the silver T-square to Mac Miller. In the center, the Best Humor Strip plaque to Dick Brown. And on the right, hosting the Reubens dinner, which was usually held in April in New York. Us kids never got to go to these fancy affairs. In the spoof on the left that Stan Drake did for the NCS newsletter in 1955, Mort gets a submission from a prospective assistant who has a very different drawing style than he does. The cover of the 1959 newsletter by Wally Wood shows a typical meeting with President Walker in the center. Oops, keep doing that. That's him right there. Wearing glasses next to Al Cap with his elbow on the bar. Doesn't look that much different than last night. 1963 was a big year. Dick Brown won both the Reubens Award for High and Lois and the Silver Lady from the Banshees, which was a prestigious group of New York newspaper editors and publishers. The Beetle also had an eventful year. Mort drew special ads for the Reubens Journal for many years. He celebrated the 21st anniversary of the NCS with the drawing on the left and paid tribute to NCS Secretary Marge Devine, right, when she retired in 1981. Marge, the beloved den mother of the NCS, worked for 32 years. I don't know if anybody here ever got to meet Marge, but she was a pistol. Moore presented one of Frank Fogarty's Holy Picture scrolls to news anchor Walter Cronkite and a Playboy bunny at the NCS War Cartoonist Night at the Hotel Astor on September 22nd, 1965. Later that year, a group of NCS members, including Mort, Bill Malden, and Milt Caniff, met with President Lyndon Johnson at the White House. Mort was a guest contestant on the TV show Password with Betty White in 1965. His opponent was Leonard Starr, who was teamed up with Arlene Francis. Mort's winnings went to the USO. Let's look at a clip of that.
Play the lightning round again. Are you ready? Ready,
I don't
Betty?
know.
Ready,
I have no
Betty?
idea.
1 minute. Here's the first word. Go.
Bad,
Good.
50.
horse,
Cow.
female,
Mare.
Yeah.
chalk,
Stick.
wall,
Blackboard.
Yes.
stretch,
Pull.
rubber,
Snap.
stretchable,
Expand.
plastic,
Say anything, Mort. Anything. Anything.
Anything.
stretchable.
5 seconds.
Elastic.
Yeah, all right.
Good boy. Duck.
Quack.
Yes. Very good, and you did it all. Well, good for you, Mort.
For them. Mort won the Best Humor Strip Award for the NCS for Beetle Bailey in 1966 and 69, and the LZ Seagar Award in 1977. This photo was taken at the Museum of Cartoon Art, which Mort founded in 1974. My father could be very sentimental when it came to his family. He did one of these Christmas cards for each of us kids in 1960. I'll read the first stanza of what he wrote. I see myself in Brian's face and think upon my childhood years, the fun I had just living hard, the love of laughter touched by tears. I lived my life as Brian does. Very sweet. Our family continued to grow until there were 7 of us. Greg, Brian, Polly, Morgan, Margie, Neil, and Roger. We're all here today, except for Morgan. Roger was born 2 years after this photo was taken for Jack and Jill magazine in 1966. I was 14 years old, and you can tell by the expression on my face I was not pleased to be featured in a kiddie magazine. Mort illustrated many family greeting cards over the years. This one was a takeoff on Charles Schultz's 1962 best-selling book, Happiness is a Warm Puppy. Beetle Bailey was licensed for numerous products during the 1950s and 60s. The first book collection was published in 1958. One of the earliest items was a board game that was entirely illustrated by Mort himself. I remember playing this game when I was a kid. A set of Beetle Bailey bobbleheads, that's a tongue twister, was marketed by former Giant football player Andy Robustelli in the 1960s. It is now a valuable collectible. This is my own personal set. Mort hired Jerry Dumas as his assistant in 1956. This photo was taken in the studio in 1961 to promote their new creation, Sam Strip. Jerry was on the staff until 2016, that's 60 years, and claimed that he and Mort never had a serious disagreement. I love the way the drawing boards face each other so they can talk while they worked. If anybody knew Jerry, he was a real talker. Mort and Jerry played vigorous games of ping pong during their lunch breaks, which inspired this 1964 Beetle Bailey Sunday page. There's a lot of great action in there. This masterpiece of graphic design is one of my favorite High and Lois pages. It was written by Mort and Jerry and illustrated by Dick Brown in 1964. The original art for this Sunday page hung in my dad's studio for many years and is in the exhibit now at the Society of Illustrators. So be sure to get over there to see it while you're here. The 1960s and 70s was described once by Dick Brown as the golden age of cartooning in Connecticut. A group of local cartoonists gathered to celebrate Mort's 40th birthday at the Millbrook Club in Greenwich, Connecticut in 1963. I won't list all of their names right now, but they were all dear friends. Early in his career, Mort discovered that golf helped him to ease the pain in his back from working long hours at the drawing board. He played avidly for the rest of his life. I wonder how many takes it took for him to sink that putt. Dick Brown painted this beautiful watercolor of Longshore Country Club in Westport, Connecticut for Mort's birthday in 1982. Longshore was one of the favorite courses for the Connecticut cartoonist. That's Dick sitting in the middle while my father hits his shot. Mort hosted the Connecticut Cartoonist Invitational Golf Tournament at the Silvermine Golf Club for over 50 years. The winner got a pie thrown in his face, and the joke telling was always above par and out of bounds. Mort's Funny Factory, fondly known as King Features East, produced 9 comic strips over the years. The staff in the 1970s included Bud Jones, Bob Gustafson, Jerry Dumas, Frank Johnson, and Greg Walker, with, of course, Mort in the driver's seat. A typical day with Mort Walker documented his patented production process, from gag writing to finished strips. This poster was produced in the 1980s by our Swedish editor and dear friend Alf Thorso for the Scandinavian fans. Mort's rallying cry for all of his gag writers was, "More funny pictures!" This page from his sketchbook shows examples of the type of visual humor he was always looking for in the strip. Mort's first autobiography, Backstage at the Strips, was published in 1975. This drawing shows his huge cast of characters, and it was used in end papers for the book. I've talked to many cartoonists who found career guidance by reading Mort's inside look into the business of comics, including Kathy Geisweit. I don't know if she's here. She told me that. It's your Bible. The Museum of Cartoon Art opened at the Mead Mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut on August 11, 1974. I had just graduated from college, and Mort asked me to clean up the place and paint the walls. Before I knew it, I was putting up exhibits as assistant curator with my old high school buddy, Chuck Green. The museum moved to Ward Castle in Rye Brook, New York in 1977. Completed in 1876, it was the first house in the world built out of reinforced concrete. One visitor remarked that it looked like something out of a Charles Addams cartoon. Kurt Swan, Joe Kubert, Mort, Bill Keane, Dick Brown, Stan Drake, and Jack Murphy were among the well-known cartoonists who came to support the museum's castle warming fundraiser on November 12, 1974. We raised $35,000 that night. This picture was in People magazine. Mort's catalog of cartoon symbols first began appearing in NCS newsletters way back in the 1950s. They were also featured in an early exhibit at the museum in 1974. He put them all together in the Lexicon of Comicana, published in 1980. Many of these terms are now in common usage, and the book has been translated into other languages. Mort demonstrated some of his cartoon tricks to Mike Peters on his World of Cartooning TV show in the 1980s. Is Mike here? No?
You know, show me that one thing when people get, are either sleeping or have an idea.
Okay,
What
well,
happened?
everybody knows the sleeping thing. You know, here's a guy that's asleep, you know. And let's say he's really asleep and he's snoring. I think everybody knows a symbol of the sawing wood, the log that's being sawed. And then, of course, the Z's that come out to accompany it to, you know, accentuate the thing. That's a log, in case you didn't know. Now, if it were you drawing this, you'd go, log, I know you. And that's sleeping, and everybody knows that one.
Yes.
Then, if you're getting an idea, usually there's a cumulus balloon, cumulus taken from the cloud. Here's a guy that's getting an idea. And he's very happy about it. And show.
Well, at least we know how old that is, because it can't be any older than Edison. So as we know, it must have started about then.
Well, I don't always like to disagree with you, but I did some research on that, and we actually found lamps being used that way. The symbol of light and idea goes way, way back in history, and you'll find all kinds of references to that. Even caveman drawings had type of things like that.
In 1984, I got my first gag writing experience on a King Features strip starring Betty Boop and Felix the Cat with my brothers Greg, Morgan, and Neil. This is a photo we did for People magazine. Mort soon had me contributing gags to Beetle Bailey and Hi and Lois. Betty and Felix lasted for about 4 years. The museum moved out of Wardcastle in 1992. 4 years later, the International Museum of Cartoon Art opened in Boca Raton, Florida. Joe D'Angelo, Catherine Walker, Jim Davis, and many other cartoonists helped Mort to raise over $6 million to build the impressive new facility. It closed in 2002 due to financial difficulties. After the IMCA closed, the collection was put in storage in Stamford, Connecticut. Many institutions approached us, including Yale University and the Bronx Museum of the Arts. Then Mort met Peter Malkin, one of the owners of the Empire State Building, and he offered us a lease for a street front space. We set up a board, renamed it the National Cartoon Museum, and hired the renowned Ralph Applebaum Associates to create computer simulations like this one to show what it could look like. Unfortunately, we were unable to raise the $7 million needed to get the project off the ground during the 2007 financial crisis that was going on at that time. The IMCA transferred its collection to Ohio State University in 2008. At the opening of the new Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum in 2013, Mort posed with Lucy Caswell in front of the sign for the gallery named in his honor. Always wore those silly ties. In the early 1990s, Neil Walker worked with Mort to create a bronze sculpture of Beetle, which is now on the campus of the University of Missouri. It's a favorite selfie spot. A Beetle balloon was featured in the Stanford Thanksgiving Day Parade during the 2000s, and Mort rode it in a Jeep with Kathy as the Grand Marshal. In the 1990s and beyond, Mort's staff continued to evolve. In the upper left is a photo of a typical gag conference with me, Mort, Jerry, and Greg. In the upper right is the High and Lois team with Chance Brown. In the bottom left is the full staff with Neil Walker and Bill Janoka. Eric Reeves on the right came on board to illustrate High and Lois in 2009. Every few months, Mort would spread out the Beetle gags for sorting on his living room floor in Stamford, Connecticut. His home was in Gutzon Borglum's former studio, who was the sculptor of Mount Rushmore. Mort loved to give visitors a tour of the house, which usually ended with an elevator ride to his third-floor man cave. I'm sure some of you took that trip. In 2014, my son David filmed my father drawing a Beetle Bailey strip and reminiscing about his childhood. Watching him do this at 90 years of age and still getting so much enjoyment out of it is a rare treat. It was part of David's film, Reveille, that he finished after Mort passed away. Take a look at this.
I fell in love with comic strips as a little boy, about 3 or 4 years old. My father used to read them to me. He'd say on Sunday morning, he'd say, "Go down and get the paper, Mort. I'll read you the comics." We'd get in bed, he'd put his arm around me, and he started reading me the comics, and his favorite was Moon Mullins. And he'd laugh so hard that tears would come down his cheeks. And I'd sit there looking at him and thinking, what a nice thing to do for people. And I started selling cartoons when I was about 10 years old. Dropped out of school, they couldn't get me to go back. And there it is, all ready for Greg to ink.
You all done?
I am all done.
It's all in a day's work.
Mort rarely missed a Reuben Award weekend, and David Folkman made sure to include him in his Reuben Journal Photoshop masterpieces. Mort was the official Reuben Award presenter for many years. In 2003, he gave Matt Groening his trophy. His last Reuben dinner was in 2015 in Washington, D.C. Gary Trudeau stopped by our table to pay his respects. Mort had many cherished friends in the NCS. He and Uncle Fred Laswell always enjoyed a good laugh together. This picture makes me laugh. In later years, tributes and awards marked his milestones. Mort Drucker congratulated Mort Walker on 50 years of Beetle Bailey in 2000. Sparky wished him a happy 90th birthday in 2003. We have scrapbooks filled with these special drawings. Actually, I think that was Mort's 80th birthday. Mort was presented with the Distinguished Civilian Service Award by Colin Powell at the Pentagon in 2000. A Beetle Bailey U.S. postage stamp was released in 2010. Along with Al Jaffe and Arna Roth, Mort received the NCS Medal of Honor at the Society of Illustrators in 2017. On September 29th, 2017, Mort was honored at Yankee Stadium for his service in World War II. As lifetime Yankee fans, Greg and I were thrilled to stand behind home plate with our dad.
And please direct your attention to the area behind home plate. as the New York Yankees welcome an honored military guest who is joined by his family. United States Army Lieutenant, 94-year-old Mort Walker from Stamford, Connecticut, who served in World War II and is the creator of the iconic Beetle Bailey comic strip. The Yankees say thank you for your sacrifice and service to our nation.
On December 16, 2017, shortly after that, Mort finished penciling his last week of Beetle Bailey strips and then had a fall while plugging in the lights on his Christmas tree. He had an operation to repair his broken hip and then caught a bad case of the flu while in rehab. After weeks in the ICU, we brought him home where he died peacefully in his studio, surrounded by his favorite things. We honored Mort's wishes by putting his drawing on his tombstone. We all miss him. The entire Walker clan gathered for Mort's memorial service at the Greenwich Country Club on March 25th, 2018. Greg's son, Andrew, on the left, is holding Mort's first great-granddaughter, Lily, who was born in April 2017. I added a photo of my granddaughter, Claire, who was born 2 years after Mort passed away. So she's a big comics fan. Over 200 friends and fellow cartoonists, including a large contingent of our Scandinavian friends, came to celebrate his life. Many cartoonists sent in touching tributes. These are from Eric Reeves and Chance Brown. Mort spent his entire career getting smiles out of his readers. He was truly one of the great masters of comic art. Thank you.